You're very welcome to St James's Church, Piccadilly. We're delighted to see you here this evening to discuss the community sponsorship scheme. We really hope that this will be a thoroughly practical evening to explain the scheme, to see how it might work here in Westminster. And we've got a fantastic panel of knowledgeable speakers lined up for you this evening. And we really hope that you will ask any question that you want to ask in the course of this evening. There's plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. But I would like to start with something slightly less practical, because as you can see, you're sitting underneath this extraordinary installation. And here at St James's, we've had this with us since the 14th of December. And it's called Suspended. Every one of these pieces of clothing was salvaged from the camps and the roadsides and the beaches of Lesbos in Greece. It's necessarily large. It takes up quite a lot of the space in the church because the current refugee crisis is and can feel overwhelming. But every single piece of clothing here belonged to somebody who undoubtedly came in the boats that some of you here will have experienced and others of us have seen on the television. So we've been living with this for 2 months, and it's intended to help us understand that for every one of these people, their lives are, we hope temporarily, but are suspended, stuck between a past to which they can't go back and a future which is not yet clear. You can see here there's a small child's T-shirt, Mummy's super cool dude. Tiny baby grow here, my first Christmas ever. Another tiny baby grow here covered in little frogs called Prince Charming. And the light at the centre you saw has just gone out. It will undulate throughout this evening. It's a warm light, and then it goes cold, and then it goes out. And the artist has put a light at the centre to help us empathise with the fading and growing hope that's experienced by people whose lives are stuck. So before we get into all the practicalities, please just take a moment, pick a piece of clothing, and wonder with me what happened to that person. So now it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium Robbie Parks, who is co-chair of Westminster Refugee Welcome. Robbie.
Good evening. It's fantastic to see you all here this evening, the panel included. My name is Robbie Parks, and I'm one of the current co-chairs of Westminster Refugee Welcome, along with Simon Perfect, who I should say has totally transformed the group over the past 6 months into what you're seeing tonight. So a large part of what you're seeing tonight is down to him. So I'd like to thank him personally for all his efforts and on behalf of all of us at Westminster Refugee Welcome. Westminster Refugee Welcome was established by several local groups at the beginning of 2017. Since then, we have developed a growing network of people and institutions in the borough who support the cause of bringing the most vulnerable refugees here into London. We have engaged with Westminster Council to participate in the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme, or VPRS for short, which was launched to help those of greatest need, including people requiring urgent medical treatment, survivors of violence and torture, as well as women and children at risk. We are delighted that Westminster Council are here to detail their intentions for how they can provide assistance in an official capacity for this urgent cause. We look forward to hearing more about that in a second. But for you guys, there are many ways to get involved with the practical elements of welcoming and helping the refugees thrive here in central London. And this includes many things, including fundraising, finding and providing housing, welcoming and greeting, language training, just helping them feel at home, as well as many other things. There's a place for everyone. So I'd ask, please sign up if you're interested via the sign-up sheets you'll see on the frontmost pews, and you can signal your interest and what you'd like to contribute. As well as at the back, there are also sign-up sheets for landlords and people who are interested in housing from Westminster to send to Westminster Council. So I just please ask you to write your name and details down there. So I just thank you one more time, and good evening.
So we're now going to hear from Westminster City Council. Councillor Ian Bott has been a Conservative councillor for Westminster since 2013. He's worked on a variety of issues, in particular tackling the obesity pandemic and antisocial behaviour. Jenny Travassos, who is Head of Prevention and Commissioning for Westminster Council, has been tackling homelessness in London for over 10 years. She's worked for the Council in a number of positions, including as Senior Manager of Rough Sleeping, and she's currently the Head of Prevention and Commissioning at the Council. I think we're going to hear from Councillor Ian Bott first. Ian.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you very much for coming to this evening. First of all, Lucy, thank you so much for your passion on this subject. You've clearly transformed your church, and when I met Lucy the first time, I just met someone who really, her heart is behind this, and you can see that in this church tonight, and I'm sure many of you who know Lucy would testify to that. I also want to thank Robbie and Simon Perfect as well. Robbie, you've been a driving force behind this. Thank you for challenging us, for pushing us, and for your passion in this area as well. I very much appreciate it. Councillor Robert Rigby, who is also a fellow councillor at Westminster, is here this evening, and it's himself and myself who have been pushing this here at the council. Councillor Nicky Aiken, who's the leader of Westminster, is also thoroughly behind this and wants to see this as a success. Now, we all know the situation. We know this is a massive issue here in the country and the world. What can Westminster do to tackle this issue? And you're here tonight to hear what we have to offer. Now, this is something that we cannot do on our own. Westminster City Council oversees and can certainly help, but we cannot do everything. And we have effectively two asks tonight. Jennifer, in a moment, will come and speak and lay out some of the detail, but really the headlines are that housing is our number one issue in this borough. We have a waiting list of about 13 years for a 3-bedroom property. Jennifer will go into those facts, but it's a very long time. We have people who are currently in temporary accommodation, and for those people, we have big issues. But what can we do? We do, however, in Westminster have some landowners, we have private landlords, and it's for those individuals that we're looking to this evening. We're also looking to voluntary groups. But what can the landlords do? For the landlords, all we're asking for is a property, however it looks. And that could be any number of bedrooms. It could be 1 bedroom, it could be 2 bedrooms, whatever we can find. They will not be called out during the middle of the night because the refugee has an issue. They will not be at the end of a telephone. All we're asking for is accommodation. So it's simple accommodation, and that normally is up to 2 years. From the volunteers, we recognise that the City Council will certainly do its role for overseeing the whole project, but really it's the communities that will welcome the refugees. And we saw in Canada where 300,000 people have been welcomed to Canada through communities like people here tonight, like yourselves, who said, listen, we want to do something about this. And it's those individuals that have made a massive, massive impact. So really we're looking, number 2, is for community groups. And it's those community groups who are part of Westminster. You could be somewhere else in the city, but you're the guys that basically will help to take the refugees to the doctor, to the dentist. They need to go to the supermarket. How do they do it? They'll pick up the phone and phone you. And so really, if this is something that you're keen to do, and maybe it could be a group from a local church, a local synagogue, a local mosque, it may just be a group of friends who say, listen, this is something we really are passionate about. We will then link you up with those private landlords, and together we can make a partnership. So I'm going to hand you over to Jennifer, who's going to flesh out the detail. And I'm also going to say a massive thank you to everyone else here this evening who's given up time. We've got a great panel, so I hope you will enjoy this evening. Thank you.
This is slightly intimidating, so please just bear with me. First of all, I want to kind of echo Ian's thanks to Robbie, because actually Robbie has come and he has challenged us as a council to think differently and to try to figure out ways to make this happen. So just to pick up on from what Councillor Bott was saying, is, the demand for housing in Westminster is significant, is probably an understatement. For a 2-bed property, the wait is about 10 years for social housing. We just don't have enough. So the ask really is about, can you bring properties? Now, thinking about what we can do, I prepared a bit to say, but I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to speak from the heart a bit. I speak much better when I speak from the heart. What can we do? As a council, we have some, what we can do is commission a service. And what I see happening is the community has such a big role to play. And picking up from what Councillor Bott had said, is that the softer stuff, thinking about if they're frightened in the night and they don't quite know what to do about something, if they need someone to go sit with them to go to the dentist, to sit at the GP's office, these things can be quite scary. And this is where you guys can come in. And from the council, what we would do is have a named contact in the council. It would be me to start with. And we would commission a service that would navigate through all of, unfortunately, what is bureaucracy, really. So if you think about people coming over to this country, they've never encountered having to deal with the benefits claim, with the Home Office, which is probably a job in itself. It's really difficult to navigate. But equally, health services, adult social care. So if they have care needs, we need to make sure that they're being looked after appropriately. So that's where we can come in. And we've really looked at how we can get housing that's affordable and sustainable for people, because that's part of the requirements on us as a council. But we really have struggled because the rents are so significant here in Westminster and we can't offer social housing. And if we want to do this, we want to house people in the borough. So what I would really ask is you consider it. Consider letting us, giving us a property. We would be happy to look at incentives if that would help. And I think we're going to hear from Claire in a bit, and she can talk about her experience. But what I can guarantee you is, as a landlord, you wouldn't be called in the night. And if there are problems, that's our job to pick it up. They would have a named caseworker. These families would have a named caseworker who would be that person. So if something went wrong in the flat, that's absolutely fine. That caseworker will pick it up, or the council will pick it up. So really, I suppose what I'm saying is you would have just about the best wraparound support, and Robbie and Simon are second to none in their passion for making this happen. And it really is because of them and Councillors Bott and Rigby that we really want to push this forward. So I will leave you with that because we have lots of other people to speak to, but we'll be around for questions. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tanya Bright. Tanya is Executive Director of Church Response for Refugees, a movement working to equip churches and communities to welcome refugees. She's also Group Director at Chapel Street, a charity dedicated to building and serving communities. Tanya.
Shall I remain here? Or?
As you wish.
I'll stay here if that's all right. We've got the two key speakers that have stood, so I'll sit. Well, thank you, everybody. It's a privilege to be here tonight and to share with you some of our experiences in recruiting community sponsors. We have, for the last couple of years, been working across the country and, of course, in London, in finding particularly churches, but any group, any community group who have a passion and a desire to want to help the people that we see represented here. We speak to different church leaders and encourage them that it is possible. All it takes is a group of 5, 10, 15 people to come together and to work together with a common cause, and that is to be a fantastic community sponsor. Now, as we've already heard, accommodation is a massive part of really resettling people in a way that is deep and integrated and meaningful. But the community sponsor is far more than just an accommodation provider. The community sponsors that we have worked with and helped with them with their applications to get through the Home Office, which isn't always the easiest or fastest task, but once the application is completed on behalf of, let's say, a church group, and there is the tick from the Home Office that indeed you as a group can be a community sponsor, we also then stay in support of you, the community sponsor, and help people break down what it is compartmentally to be a successful community sponsor. It is, as we've heard, it is taking on a family and imagining that you were to move to a different country tomorrow. The things that are obvious to us may not be obvious to others. Setting up a bank account is hard enough if you are from this country and speak this language and have a full understanding of our systems. Healthcare, education, counselling. Many of the people that we place through community sponsorship have, of course, suffered huge trauma. The community sponsor as well is not just there to connect people to services and the benefit system, as vital as that is, but it's about befriending. And it's about giving people a place of belonging, of a community who are committed, who know each other's names, who come round and cook together. One of the greatest experiences that our community sponsors share with us is that they have received so much more from the interchange than what they ever imagined. I think in the early days, community sponsors felt as though they might be top-down service providers, albeit in a very charitable way. But what we found is that the community sponsors, they themselves are being changed. Their sense of hospitality is deepening. Their desire to want to understand new languages and cultures is wonderful. We have many, many stories of where people in our local churches who may not have felt as though they had much to give have found themselves now as critical component parts of giving a family, children, brothers and sisters, a real way forward with hope to be able to start again in safety. So our experience has been one of joy, sometimes bureaucratic, helping community sponsors get through certain processes, but Church Response for Refugees is here to support any interested party. We love working with local authorities, city councils, any groups, any persuasion whatsoever. So if you would like to consider being a community sponsor, we would love to support you in that process, break it down so that it's achievable. Somebody said to me recently, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer, of course, is one bite at a time. And that's what it's been like for us supporting community sponsors. Together, we forge forward, project manage, and a bite at a time, we are finding we are settling people in a way that will leave a permanent legacy. So thank you.
Tanya, before I introduce the next speaker, can I just check with you, for a community sponsor, they need to raise some money to start with?
Yes, the Home Office have put what we would call, Lucy, a ring-fenced figure that a community sponsor needs to raise. Now that money, £9,000 per family, 2 adults and X number of children, is in fact there for emergency purposes. That £9,000 is not handed over to the sponsored family. It stays in a bank account. You, the community sponsor, were told, and it's for things like emergencies. If the welfare system doesn't kick in quick enough, then it's there. If the boiler goes and we can't get somebody around quick enough under a warranty, it's there. So it's a ring-fence £9,000 over those 2 years where there is a commitment to the community sponsor. And we're finding some sponsors don't eat into that at all. Others, I have to say though, Lucy, particularly where rent is a challenge and where rent prices are high, which is, let's face it, typically our large urban areas, London obviously most prolific, that sometimes that £9,000 part of that goes towards topping up rent, which has helped.
Thank you. And the commitment is 2 years?
Yes, it's 2 years. Right. 1 year for what we would call wraparound service in the way that we've discussed, and 1 year further on from that with the continued commitment to that accommodation. We're finding many of our families, however, are wanting to stay involved past the 1 year mark.
Thank you very much. You don't mind me clarifying just a couple of points there. So we're going to hear now from Nick Schlagman, who's Head of Social Action and Interfaith at West London Synagogue. He has a long history of campaigning for refugees and has recently led a fundraising campaign to bring 100 child refugees to the UK and is involved with the community sponsorship scheme. Nick.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. When you look up in West London Synagogue, you see a plain white roof, and the roof of the synagogue was bombed took an indirect hit in the Second World War, and the roof was damaged, and the community raised money to rebuild the roof. And rather than putting an ornate roof on top, put a simple white roof, and gave the rest of the money that was raised to bring over kinder transport children from Europe. My grandmother was one of the kinder who was saved by West London Synagogue, where I now work. We're somewhere down the road with community sponsorship. I'd say we're probably, we're something like 2/3 of the way through to the point where, and we're hoping that a family will arrive with us at the start of this summer. In the end, we had an opportunity to work together with a synagogue in Streatham, in Lambeth, and now also with a local mosque, as there was a caretaker's flat that was renovated and became a good opportunity for us to pursue community sponsorship. What I have to say is, having gone through the process, the Home Office template for community sponsorship, the things to note are that London has an incredible array of services available for refugees and asylum seekers in terms of acquisition of language, support, employment support, as well as obviously already existing networks for families to get involved with, to find friends, to build networks, and to start rebuilding their lives. In many respects, London is as suitable a place anywhere in the UK to bring a family and to give them the possibility of really succeeding here. Again, where we find the challenge is around accommodation, or affordable accommodation. I would go further and say that the South London Liberal Synagogue that we're working with in Streatham is a very small community, which has an even smaller core group of people at the centre of it. And what they've found by engaging with this project is that members of the community, but who had not found a place to really live out their faith values, have found through this project something to grab hold of and get involved with. New members, new people have come and joined or are in the process of joining the community in order to be part of this. So it's not only an incredible expression of faith values, but also a way of growing or deepening connections that exist already within faith communities. And then more so than that, when we realised we were possibly just a little bit short of the manpower resourcing for the project, in steps the local mosque. And then suddenly here's a project being run together by 2 synagogues and a mosque. So in terms of that slightly wider sense of local community, this is also something that's clearly bringing people together and deepening that. We have, it's a significant piece of work and a significant undertaking. I would say that for community sponsorship to work from the perspective of the community, there needs to be a core dedicated team of 6 to 10 people who are going to have a decent amount of time and need to come together to do that piece of work. And then slightly larger than that, probably a slightly wider group of a further kind of 10 or 15 core, volunteers who are going to come along and help make this work, particularly in the month leading up to and the first 3 months when the family is there. However, those people have not been hard to find. In fact, we have more volunteers than we need, and somehow this is deepening everyone's connection with community. Have I spoken enough?
Yes, I just want to ask, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's been the biggest challenge so far? So you think a family is arriving at the beginning of the summer.
Yes.
When did you start this process? And from your point of view, what's been the biggest challenge from the community group's point of view to becoming a sponsor?
So we started in earnest probably in September. The most challenging bit, I'm not sure that we've hit the most challenging bit yet. I would say that it's been, it's not been difficult to populate the resettlement template with all of the services that have been provided. We have been fortunate that, people have come forward with money and to be volunteers. I think that we have still got a piece of work to do to really understand how exactly to place all of the services around the family to give them the greatest chance of succeeding, particularly around language acquisition and exactly how many free hours and how many paid hours, in order to really do that. Other than that, I would say that this has been a process that has had far more positives than challenges.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks. We're now going to hear from Claire Burnett from Hammersmith and Fulham Refugees Welcome. Claire is an artist and president of the Royal British Society of Sculptors. She's a core member of Hammersmith and Fulham Refugees Welcome and has travelled to the Calais jungle with councillors to raise awareness about the situation there. She is currently a landlady to a refugee, is that right? You're going to speak about that, okay? So you're going to speak from a landlord
I'm going to
perspective.
stand up,
Please do.
I sort of can't see everybody.
No problem.
So
No problem.
Small down on the table.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So what I want to talk to you about is just a sort of very individual perspective, because obviously I know some of you are here from bigger organisations, but I just want to talk a little bit about how we as a family in London have done something or wanted to do something. So as you said, I've been involved in Hammersmith and Fulham Refugees along with Bashar, who's also been doing lots of voluntary work for them, and also we're just going through the process of becoming a landlady under the landlords under the VPRS scheme for a property that we've had for a long time in Kensington and Chelsea, very luckily. So we started, I went to Calais, as I said, and I came back. We've got young adult children, and we were very aware of how we come from, like many people in London, we come from somewhere else, and what would happen if our children had to suddenly flee and be somewhere else, and how would we want them treated, and what would we do? So for the last few years, with refugees at home, we've hosted in young men usually, but refugees who are often homeless, and just to get them on their way in London, a bit like a sort of Airbnb type system for a few months, or anything from a couple of weeks to a few months. And so we've been sort of merrily doing that, and I've been involved in Hammersmith and Fulham Refugees Welcome, and it's been an amazing experience and incredibly exciting and interesting. But we've got this property and it was rented, and then we decided, the tenants gave in their notice, and I slightly felt having campaigned to try and get people to offer their properties that's what we should do, really, because there was sort of no way out slightly. So just for any of you, many of you may know this, but I was certainly very confused when I came back to Calais, because there are several systems all running at the same time. So the VPRS scheme is a commitment by the government to bring 20,000 people over directly from the camps. They're people who are on the vulnerable persons list with the UN. So they're already sort of vetted and on that list and ready to come as soon as a property can be found available. In addition to that, there's a 3,000 vulnerable children from the Middle East scheme that sort of gets sort of slightly involved in the VPRS scheme. So in Hammersmith and Fulham, we've got 6 families, and some of those families have come through Syrian, have come through the VPRS scheme, and some have come through the Middle East Children's Scheme. So that's all the sort of council work. Then the individual hosting, that has to be in a lockable, independent property, flat, 1 bedroom plus flat. That's different from hosting, which is a sort of more informal, like having a guest in your house. So just to sort of clarify, because it took me quite a while to get that sorted. So talking about the VPRS scheme, it's the government scheme. It involves always the council, even if it's community sponsorship. I think that's right, isn't it, Tanya? That it has to go through the council still. So so as a landlady, this property is a 1-bedroom flat in Kensington, Chelsea. And my main thing is, especially being involved with the refugees, my sort of red line is I do not want to be emotionally involved with that family. So that's the main thing, and that's been absolutely fine, and we've put systems in place with the Refugees Welcome Group in Kensington and Chelsea, and with the council. The other thing is obviously the rent. And I've sort of thought of it really, I mean, it's basically about £5,000 less a year. That's fun, and it's just a donation, and I think that's the easiest way to deal with it. I think it's £260 a week for a one-bedroom flat in Kensington, Chelsea, and obviously it's more if you rented it out commercially, but you don't have to pay estate agents' fees, and there are various bits that you can sort of knock back off again. And then the benefit is you get this fantastic refugees welcome team who sort of move in like a sort of this fantastic operation who sort of do everything and get the electrician to quote and are covering costs, helping me cover costs of the sort of transition. And then I've got the sort of this fantastic officer on the phone from Kensington Chelsea who is doing the sort of formal bit of help. They've given me an amount to sort of hold the flat, and then is there to sort of liaise and make sure that we get the right person and things. So it's been incredibly easy, much easier than finding a tenant and getting a tenant in, and much more friendly and much more fun as a sort of whole process. And so it's not, we're in the interim sort of phase. We think we've got a couple of people who might be coming, and we're just sort of waiting to see, waiting to get that all sorted. But it has been very easy. But I think what I would urge is, there may be some of you here with properties, and that is fantastic. It is really easy, and it's you've just got to accept you're going to get a bit less rent, really, and it might be part of, if you're lucky enough to be able to give a charitable donation or something, to just treat it like that. In return, a family now sitting in a camp now, with an ill child or an ill father or something, could be here in a few weeks' time getting treatment in a London hospital. And that is an incredible, life-changing thing to do quite simply, really, for not much effort. So I'd urge you to think about that. If you can't do that, Refugees at Home I think I got 94 people they need to place at the moment in London in bedrooms. So do that. And do get involved in your local refugee welcome. So at Hammersmith and Fulham, we have groups of befrienders who work with the caseworker and the council around a family and support them, and it's really fun. So thank you very much.
Our last speaker is Bashar, who is a volunteer at Migrants Organise. Bashar is a Syrian asylum seeker himself. He's going to show us a short PowerPoint presentation, so I'll let you go and do the technology, Bashar. Please could we ask that audience members don't take photographs of the images that he's going to show. Some of them are of a personal nature. Also be aware that some of the images may be a little upsetting. But we're going to hear from Bashar. We're really delighted that you're with us tonight.
Good evening. My name is Bashar, and I'm a Syrian asylum seeker. Today I'm here to share a story, but it's not my story. It's more a story about people that I know for many years by now. It all started in Syria when everything was lost, destroyed, or vanished in the war. The home, the job, the life, the safety, even the dreams, all gone like that. And it got worse when the mother of my daughters got killed by a shell bomb that hit our house just 3 months after giving birth to my youngest daughter. Just 1 week later, my daughter started to feel really ill, to the point that she was admitted to the hospital. And that's when the journey started. 45 days in hospital in Syria, and the result, we don't know what's wrong. I decided to leave to save her, and I took her and her sister, who was only 3 years old at the time, to cross to Turkey. And the answer was the same: we don't know what's wrong. This was Lillian. She was dying in my arms, but I refused to accept it. I managed to get to Bulgaria after walking for 13 hours, carrying my 2 daughters, to cross the border, and Lillian was admitted to the hospital in Sofia. But after 3 months, I only got the same answer: we don't know what's wrong. Since the war started, I lost everything. But that minute, I lost hope. I gave up on everything, knowing that there are no more doors to knock or ways to walk out. But a week later, a British charity that works with children abroad called me asking about my daughter. Someone at the hospital sent them an email saying, maybe you can help this girl. They called me and asked for reports and documents and medical reports, send it to the hospitals in London. And they reply, this child needs to come to London as soon as possible for urgent medical care. Yes, hope is back, but we all know it's not easy, especially for a Syrian who's fleeing the war. It took some time to sort things out, and it wasn't easy, but they didn't give up. And even that in 2013, there was no such thing as sponsorship scheme for any refugees, but they managed to do their own scheme. They managed to do it in their own way. They applied for visa for the three of us and gave the Home Office a statement that they will help us and support us until my daughter finished her treatment. And there is a lot more that they are doing until this day. After a few months, and after my daughter was diagnosed with a very rare condition called chylomicron retention disorder, and after knowing that she will need medical care for all her life, we tried to settle down a bit, and I start searching of what I can do. This is when I went to Migrants Organize. I went there asking for advice, and I thought that I will never hear from them again. But after only a few days, they called me back, inviting me to one of their activities. I went there to get help, but as I spoke English well, and as I used to be an accountant in Syria before the war, they showed me that I also can help, that I can be part of this like anyone else. I started volunteering with Migrants Organize as an accountant and ended up helping people like me to settle down and starting their new life with new chances. I got involved and I met officials and welcome committees in Kensington and Chelsea and in Hammersmith and Fulham to help with all what I can. It's been 4.5 years now, and even that I'm still an asylum seeker as the Home Office is refusing to give us a refugee status. But I have friends and family thousands of miles away from home. It has been done before, even before the community sponsorship scheme exists. And now we have the scheme. You can be now one of these people who want to help and want to get involved. Get on board and help us to change lives from this to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our speakers. We have some time now for questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please do, in the usual way, raise your hand. So we have just one here. We'll bring a microphone to you. The acoustics are tricky here, so do hold the microphone close to your mouth, and please be brief, and please make it a question.
Okay. Well, I'm Marjorie. I'm a retired nurse and midwife, and I run a personal project of family link-up. I link up many Syrian refugees. They're scattered between Turkey and parts of Europe. It's been a 3-year project so far and ongoing. I will not rest until I've got their lives rebuilt. But I want to make you aware, because in summertime I actually went up to Sheffield, where it's a city of sanctuary, and they are really rather a good model of care for you to be able to tap into. I went to a conference called Optimising Volunteer Support for Refugees in the UK and in the camps. I've been out to the camps myself. And it was really a good time of sharing. What they're doing is that they're integrating the refugees quite quickly into the community by offering them volunteer work. Obviously there's language skills built up, but they're becoming very well loved in the city. And a couple of the refugees actually put on workshops in the conference, and they made a meal. But the key to it is, and we must be mindful of this before we Brexit, that was funded by the EU, and there is a lump of money for us. There's several billions of euros that we can tap into. I can't tap into it as an individual carer befriender, but NGOs can. And maybe you could start something where you could tap into that money. And I've spoken directly with Jean-Claude Juncker about that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you. We've got somebody just over here. Yeah, and then over there.
I understand that in Westminster there's a very large house with 52 spare bedrooms. And can I suggest that most of those bedrooms could go towards making homes for Syrian families, and the person who owns the house is the Queen?
Thank you. Okay, just over here, please. It would be nice to have a question over here, if it is a question. Thank you.
Hi. This is a question for the councillor. I'm Dr. Brennan. I'm an A&E consultant and Westminster resident. And in April, I submitted a petition to the council asking a question which I don't feel they've answered. The question is, will the council commit to expressing an interest to the Home Office under the GPRS scheme in resettling 50 Syrian refugees in Westminster?
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Obviously, tonight we're making a start. So as a council, we've said we want to make an impact, we want to make a difference, but that number is dependent on the accommodation, as has been mentioned. So we don't want to commit to any number because we want to fulfill what we do. So if we say to people in this room, we're going to commit to 50, if we don't get it, then we're not helping anyone. What we can do is ask landlords here tonight, and if you know landlords, you have friends maybe who are in Westminster, maybe you know someone that has a 20-bedroom or a 10-bedroom place that actually is available, or a 1-bedroom place, then really people here tonight, please use your networks and ask people, because we cannot do this without accommodation. So I take your point, and I recognise we would love to take 50 on, we would love to, but accommodation is our number one ask. So really, if we haven't got the accommodation, we can take nobody. And that's why we're running tonight, to ask for community groups and for landlords to come forward.
Okay, let's have some more questions over here. The answer is no, the commitment is not to 50. That was the answer. So, I mean, I take the point, but that was the answer that the councillor gave. So I do want to move on. Can we come over here, please? We've got a couple. We'll take a couple together.
Thank you. Does the community group, the support group, that has to raise £9,000 also have to commit to finding the accommodation? That's part of the package.
Thank you. Can we just hold that? I'll ask you to answer that in a moment. And let's take this gentleman here. Just want to take a couple together to get as many people in as possible.
Thank you. My question is, I wonder if I might be able to help, because we are actually a group from Hackney. We've had a family. A lot of the questions, forgive me, I've made notes of things that I'd like to contribute. So my question to you is, would you allow me just to answer some of the points? Like that one, at whatever time you choose.
Thank you. Can I hold that? We'll see how we do for time. So perhaps we can just answer the question about the community groups. £9,000. Do the community groups also have to find accommodation? Would you answer that, Tanya?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. Yes, as part of the responsibility of a community sponsorship group, we work alongside, and one would have to go to the open market, the private rental market, typically, to find a property that would be fit for the size of family that may then be matched to you as a community sponsor. We have found, however, that there are many creative ways of doing this. For example, working with local housing associations. Also, some of our community sponsors get directly in touch with the local authority and find that actually we are able to tap into some housing stock, granted, not in London. So yes, it is something that the community sponsor is responsible for, but we also find as well that many private landlords, as we were hearing from Claire, they contribute that towards their part of wanting to be a contributor to the community sponsorship group in that area.
Can I just ask a question on that, actually? But when you say they commit to finding the property, they still get paid DSS rates. So it's the top up, is that right? It's the top up that you might have to raise, but it's not...
Absolutely.
It's not the whole amount.
The local authority, who one would have got on side anyway, just as part and parcel of the application process, will pay according, the market rent that the local authority would pay for housing benefit. And absolutely, if there is perhaps a property that's been found which is a little more expensive than the local authority would typically pay, then the community sponsors can make a decision to or not top up that amount to create a home for that family.
Thank you. Let's take some more comments. So in the front here, please, and then at the side there.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Rinka Bell. I'm from Migrants Organize, and I've been working with friends from Westminster Refugee Welcome the past 2 years, as well as with the synagogue and Rabbi Danny Rich and many others, on getting more refugees to come here safely. One of the boroughs that we were able to get to sign up is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And based on those lines, many other boroughs have signed up. And we're also now, as an organization, registering to be a community sponsor for people who don't belong to churches or mosques or synagogues, so they can join in this wonderful initiative. My brother ended up on community sponsorship in the United States, whereas I was asylum seeker in this country. What I wanted to share, and what I wanted to pin you down perhaps a little bit, Councillor Bott, is that Kensington and Chelsea Council has offered to match pound for pound everything that our Welcome Committee raises in order to top up rents. And so we're looking for flats, and we will top up rents. We have not settled on the number, but what we have from the council is this public commitment that they will work with us and sign up to the scheme. And obviously, refugees will only start coming once we have properties. Is that the commitment that Westminster Council is making tonight? And I'm not going to ask you to match us for pound yet. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your question. I think, obviously, there are things that the Westminster Council can do. So in terms of private landlords, if they come forward, there are incentives that we can offer. We can help make the accommodation fully suitable. So there are grants that we have available that we can use. And again, we will think creatively on how we can make this happen. So if we have a landlord that comes to us and says, listen, I've got an accommodation, but it just needs a bit of work, then we can look at that, we can talk to them, and we can try and make it happen. We're really keen to make this happen, but we can only do that, as I said, with partnership working. So yes, there are things we can do.
Yes, over the side there. And then, yeah.
Hello, I'm Caroline. I want to befriend an asylum seeker or a refugee. And I don't just want to befriend them because I'm quite good at being a friend, but I need to know what I can do to help them. I know I need to buy them an Oyster card, but you don't normally do that with your friends. I mean, I just would like some guidance, or I'd like somewhere to join so I can be told, why don't you do so-and-so, why don't you do so-and-so?
If Caroline is a member of our congregation here, if St James's decided to be a community sponsor, there's your joining. And we'll do it together, but we haven't said where we're going to do it yet. Okay, yes, please. This gentleman here, and then just behind there. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Musiola Salasi. I'm an Eritrean refugee. Thank you very much for this event. I'm very pleased by your history. My question is, there are a lot of Eritrean refugees in this country as well. So how do you sit on that? Is it only for Syrian refugee, or is other refugees as well?
Thank you. Please, could you...
And the second thing is that I would like to set up to help us on set up I'm trying to set up a Eritrean community that could help Eritrean refugees as well. This is one of the things I would love to learn tonight as well.
So Eritrean refugees, are they eligible for this scheme?
Unfortunately, they're not eligible for this scheme. This is very much kind of badged as a central government policy around Syrian vulnerable resettlements out of the camps. If you are looking to set up some things for Eritrean refugees, I can put you in contact with a wonderful woman from Hammersmith and Fulham who's done that very thing. She runs a Horn of Africa charity. So if that is something you're interested in, I can absolutely put you in contact. But for this particular thing, it is focusing on Syrians.
So this particular scheme is Syrian refugees. Okay, yep.
Good evening. Councillor Bott,
I'll come back.
there have been a number of questions and I don't think we have quite got to the bottom of it. So I wonder if you could answer this question with a yes or a no. Are Westminster Council committing to contacting the Home Office to start this process off?
So as I said, we cannot start the process unless we have the accommodation. That's the answer that I've already given, and I'll give it again. Thank you.
So no, not until accommodation is the answer, which you may not like. Yes, can we just come to the front here? There's the lady here.
Hi, my name's Sophia and I also work at Migrants Organise. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things there. You can begin the process of community sponsorship without finding accommodation. Home Office can provide you with a decision in principle. and they recognise that that can help you with the application itself because it can speed things along. So when you do find the property owner, it can help to reassure them that you've been through the process and that you have been approved in principle already. I'd like to also just clarify the point on who the scheme is open for. When the government made the commitment to resettle 20,000 refugees, it was done so in response to the Syrian crisis. However, since then, the Home Office have expanded the VPRS scheme to people in the area, so people affected by, it's people affected by the conflict in Syria. So these could be people who are already refugees within Syria or affected in other ways. I know that can sound ambiguous. I think in practice it also means from the region, the Middle East region, and also I believe certain parts of Horn of Africa. I think this can be a bit confusing too, because there is the children's resettlement scheme, and we do know families, for example, from Sudan who have been resettled through the children's resettlement scheme. So there is potential there for other community groups to organise and to ensure that their voices and that they're represented within the resettlement schemes as well. On the Eritrean front, I know there was a parliamentary question asked a couple of weeks ago in Parliament around this, so if you'd like to work together on that would be great.
Could I ask the Councillor to respond to that, because you're saying that the contact to the Home Office can happen without accommodation being secured, is that right? Is it, for community sponsorship scheme, it's possible to start the process without accommodation having been secured?
Yes, well, that's the so council can go to the office and say we want to do this.
For community sponsorship?
Both community sponsorship and VPRS can be signed up.
So the gentleman behind you is shaking his head.
If I say, our understanding, the community sponsorship starts with the community, not with the council. You get the sign-off. We have gone through it. The last thing you do is when you've got everything in place, you come to the council. This is as a community. Madam Chairman, people, may I just tick off a few points?
I honestly want to take other comments, but I will come back to you.
Plenty of people have been making statements, not asking questions.
I will come back to you at the end if we've got time. I will.
That's great.
Okay, there's lots more people over this side, please. Yes, this gentleman here, and then this lady there.
Hello, my name is Stephen Saxby. I've also worked with Citizens UK and in my own borough where I live in Waltham Forest to help to settle refugees, and I'm now working to support efforts here in Westminster. I mean, I do think we need a bit of perspective on this, yeah? The government said that we would take 20,000 Syrian refugee families, but it's voluntary upon local councils to offer to take numbers in each local authority. And it's brilliant. The local authorities around the country have made a commitment, and that commitment has enabled local groups to work with the council, as we've done in Waltham Forest, to then bring families in. And sometimes that commitment might only be 10 families, but nevertheless that's a commitment to take in some of those families who are currently waiting in those terrible camps in the Middle East. I think we need to be very clear that we can only fulfil that commitment if councils step up to the plate and say, we'll make sure that all those 20,000 families come in. And then the voluntary schemes are about adding more refugees, not in place of the 20,000 of promised, but actually bringing more families in. I think, if we look at what we're doing in contrast with many other countries around the world, our contribution as a country is pitiful. And I know we're stretched for resources, but we're also one of the richest countries in the world. And we should have a very clear commitment to make sure that this council takes in some families and that then we as a community help to take more on top.
Thank you. Can I take a question? Just in front, this lady here. Okay.
Hi, sorry. I'm just wondering if I'm just an individual who would really like to come in and help and just to sort of meet some people and maybe teach some English and just give some of my time, but I'm not part of any community. I'm just wondering if there's any way to do that, or is it just you have to do the community things?
Silence. Do you live in Westminster?
I actually lived in Camden Borough, but like I'm right on the edge.
So find your Refugees Welcome group and sign up to it. And they'll link you with other things in the area as well, I would say.
On their pew where they can put their name and anything they might be interested in volunteering to do in East Park. And you will be contacted after completing and trying to redirect you in the right.
So you can sign up here tonight is the answer. Thank you.
I'm Ruth Bush. I'm one of the Labour councillors on Westminster City Council. I just wanted to ask, it's lovely to hear about the flat that's being rented. I don't know whether this is being done, but is there any reason why the council can't approach the major property owners in Westminster, given what Westminster actually is in relation to property, and make connections through them with groups that are willing to do this work?
Thanks,
Thank
Ruth.
you, Councillor, yes.
Thank you. We have done that, and they've been invited tonight. And the conversations, this is not, I know Ruth, you've emailed me on this very point, but this is not the final conversation. This will carry on. So if there are people who are willing to volunteer, and everyone, all the landowners have been invited tonight, and I want to thank those landowners that have come tonight, or the representatives or private landlords. We really are so grateful. And again, Westminster Council could have turned around and gone, you know what, we're going to do nothing. But we haven't done that. We said we want to make this happen in Westminster. Absolutely. Issues here are housing, and we recognise that people in this room have strong feelings, irrespective of the political divide that you sit on. And we ask you, if you want to make a difference in this, then let's work together. Let's say, listen, let's take on the community sponsorship scheme, which can find a housing, and it's up to the individuals to help with this. I'm afraid government can do a lot, and it is doing a lot, and we're helping, but it cannot do everything. The community, I'm afraid, has to do something as well. So in terms of those community groups here that want to make a difference, we want to help you to do a difference. And again, the landlords, we are so keen to help with you as well. So please do come forward, write on your sheets, as we mentioned. If you have a request or an offer, we would love to talk to you. Thank you.
So this lady just has been waiting, that's it. Great.
Hello, Veronica from St James the Less. My question is there any scope for cooking and hosting a meal for a refugee family from time to time in our own homes?
Has that happened in community sponsorship schemes?
How to go around about arranging this?
I understand.
Thank you.
Is there scope within this scheme for cooking a meal for a family in your own home as part of the team, is what you're asking? Yes. So, yeah.
Yes, particularly working with a group, a community sponsorship group, you know, that's one of the core asks is that food is cooked and shared, and that way befriending naturally happens around food. But if you aren't part, for example, of a community sponsorship group per se, then there are some other organisations. We've heard already about Refugees at Home is an organisation where if you do have a spare room, or if you would just like to offer some hospitality, they would happily connect you in. Any one of us along this panel tonight would probably connect you with a family who's been sponsored. So please do put your name down, because any befriending, any cooking, any hospitality is a step in the right direction.
So we are asking everybody here to say what you would like to be involved in, and somebody will come back to you. Nick? Was that? Yes, please.
There's a great new young group of people setting up a new app called Timepiece. So have a look out for that, because that's going to be about skills sharing. So, I don't know, Bashar might teach me Arabic and I might teach him pottery or something, you know, and you can swap a bit like a babysitting circle system. So that'll be an app, but keep your eye out for that, because that might be something you could do.
Okay, this lady's there with the red scarf.
Hi, it's just a point of clarification. The 20,000 is not 20,000 families, it's 20,000 people within families.
Yes.
So which is considerably less. And also, some of the schemes like community sponsorship, they're not on top. I mean, I'm a member of a community sponsorship group in Hackney, but our family is not on top of that 20,000. It counts as part of that 20,000. So I think, you know, we need to be clear what the government is actually doing. And the 3,000 vulnerable children is families that have a vulnerable child in them, which makes up 3,000. It's not 3,000 children.
Thank you. That's helpful clarification. Claire?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, I've been very, very political about this, and I can feel there are a lot of people being very political about this in the room as well, and absolutely right, because it is a massive political issue. But I think on this, the whole thing comes down to this problem, that in the end, you just have to be really practical and think, in London, London does welcome people, and it is used for to having people who come to stay, and people want to help and they want people to come, but there are no properties, and we all know there's a massive housing crisis. So that is the problem here. It's nothing really else. It's can we get out there and can we find properties, and if we find them, then people can come. And I just think it's a sort of pragmatic thing, really. And then beyond that, there are all the political things. But if everyone in this room thinks of everybody they know who might possibly rent out a property, know somebody who rents out a property, that's the way to get people to come, really. It's really simple.
This gentleman at the front here. Yep.
Hi, I'm Councillor Adam Hugg. I'm, like Ruth Bush, a member of the Labour Group in Westminster Council. Just wanted to ask very quickly to Jenny and Ian. Obviously, you've talked about the work, and you've already said before about the work you're doing with landowners in Westminster to ask them to bring forward homes. Can I clarify that you've also been encouraging people who may not have things that are traditionally thought of as flats? I mean, so there's obviously empty spaces above shops, other sort of non-traditional housing spaces that could be converted by willing landowners on a temporary basis to help tackle some of this crisis. Because obviously I appreciate we've got stresses and strains on temporary accommodation that's available in Westminster normally. So the first point, sort of non-traditional accommodation, and what you're talking to landlords about that. And secondly, I know you've made the point about the resettlement scheme and that you're not willing to make a commitment yet. I think what would be really helpful tonight is if the community comes forward in the way that you hope tonight, that you will then make that commitment going forward, that you're willing to make that commitment to going forward. Because ultimately, if Kensington can do it, if all the other London boroughs can sign up, Westminster can too. And, you know, I'm not going to try and sandbag you now, but ultimately, can you commit that if you get the response you're looking for tonight, that you will sign up to the scheme?
Thank you. 2 points there, Councillor, please.
I will take the first point. Thank you, Councillor Hugg. In short, yes. And we are limited in what the Home Office prescribe for what kind of accommodation. It needs to be kind of sustainable. It needs to have its own front door. It needs to have and you know as well as I do the pressure on housing. And if there is, we have explored every creative option we can, not just to house refugees, but also to house the homeless families that we have on our waiting list. You've known me for a while. I'm pretty dogged in my pursuit of trying to sort this out. And all I can do is assure you that I have done my level best to try to come up with a solution, but I can't for the accommodation, which is why we're here tonight to say, we've got the will. We will do everything we can to sign up to this. If we have properties, we will commission a service, and we can provide incentives to landlords where needed. We can fix up properties. You know, we just need the bricks and mortar, in short. I'll let you take the other.
Will you sign up to 50? Sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jennifer's answered the point that if we have the accommodation and the community to help with this, then it can happen. But until we get that point, we can't make anything happen. So if we get those two things, it can happen.
And will you make the commitment if you get the response that you want tonight? That's the question.
Yeah, if we get those two things to happen, then it can happen. As I said, we're dependent on those two things, but if those two things happen, we can make it happen.
Okay, we're coming to the end. We're just going to take this lady, yes, here, and then final one at the back there. Perhaps we can take that one first, since you're right there, and then I'll come to you now. Yeah.
I know we've heard from councils a lot, but how can we lobby our local MP, for example, Mark Field, on this issue? And how can he help, and how can we get his input?
How to engage Mark Field, the MP?
Right to him. But as again, this is down to the local authority to agree to the scheme. But if there's something you want to write to Mark about, then do write to him, or if you're from any part of London, write to your MP on that very issue. But again, if you're living in a different part of London, then again, write to your local council, because only if the council sign up to this can it happen. And here in Westminster, we've agreed to do just that. We've said, yes, we want to see in Westminster, we want to welcome refugees. And again, we go back to the point that this can only happen if we get the landlords and the communities to do that. Thank you.
This lady here.
Yes, I wanted to ask Bashar a question. In the experience that you've been through, what kinds of practical support did you find particularly welcome?
Thank you. Good question. Very good.
Fantastic.
Well, to be honest with you, with refugees, it's different on each individual. Now, when I came to London, I spoke English very well. That helped me a lot. So I can speak to doctors, I can read documents, I can fill applications. It was very complicated because I'm not used to the system, but it was easier because I speak English. But some other people who don't speak English, it will be just, they are like being sent to another planet. They don't understand what's being said around them. They will receive a letter that they won't know what is it, even if it's like a flyer for like a restaurant or like a court order. They will get sick, they won't be able to call a GP to book an appointment. So everything about their life will be different on each individual. Some of them will be able to learn. In 6 months they will be able to speak English. They will start going around, going to courses, sometimes maybe even finding a job if you have a good profession that it's needed. But for some other it might take longer. But the main point that 99% of refugees is not people who is coming to just sit and get money and housed. It's people who want to come and change their life. A lot of them are going to English classes in colleges, a lot of them who start like their higher education here, a lot of them who start doing jobs. And even some of them are like me who don't have the right to work, but we are finding a way to help somehow. When someone asks about volunteering, you can help in many ways. You can go to your welcome committees. You can contact some of the charities that work with refugees. You can approach the colleges or the groups that are giving English classes or professional classes. There's a lot of ways that you can help. You don't help just by having a property. You can help by being a member of the committee, because the scheme is called the committee sponsorship scheme. It's not an individual scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very good note. Thank you, Bashar. That's a really excellent note to end our panel presentations, except we have now Canon Pat Brown, who is here somewhere, I think, yes, from Holy Apostles Church in Pimlico, and several of you have been saying, what can I do? And Father Pat is going to tell us, please go to the next one, what you can do. And perhaps I could also say, with the two people at the front here, with the gentleman who wanted to clarify some points, please do, people will come and speak to you. We're going to have a drink now, but please do come and speak to this gentleman here if you want to ask questions about the community sponsorship scheme. Thank you for your contribution. Pat.
Lucy, can I just say that wasn't my brief, so could I hand what you've described over to that gentleman there?
Yeah, okay.
And my brief was to
That's
finish
fine.
with a prayer.
Okay. Can I just say then, please sign up on your sheets. Please say what it is that you are able to contribute, and please do stay for a drink afterwards. Conversation is where this is going to happen. The councillors will stay around. We're very glad that the Lord Mayor has joined us as well, so please do buttonhole him afterwards. I'm sure he'll be delighted to speak to you. And Father Pat, sorry to hijack your talk, but please do close with a prayer.
We ask you, Almighty God, to look down with all your love on the goodwill that's here tonight. Open the doors that need to be opened to bring that goodwill into practice. Disturb us, Lord, when we're too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dreamed too little, because we sailed too close to the shore. Stir us, O Lord, to dare more boldly to venture into wider seas, where storms show your mastery, where losing sight of land we shall find the stars. Bless us with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within your heart. Bless us with fears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and to turn their pain to joy. And bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in the world, so that we will do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to those most in need. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Please do stay for a drink. Please do engage further with the members of the panel. Thank you very much. Good night.